Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm just going to walk you through at a high level view of some of the areas around business, social, and corporate governance. Here's a brief bio about myself. As you can see, I have a lot of experience in different areas. I've worked with a lot of clients across geography and industry. I am a CPA, so I've worked in corporate reporting in the compliance area for well over 35 years. Here's my agenda. I'll talk about corporate and I'll talk about social governance. We have to break these two buckets down. Corporate governance is the overall view of an organization in terms of its control and direct leadership, in terms of how those policies from the budget, in terms of results, as well as overall hiring practices, everything start from the board and filter all the way down to the various business units across industry, across division and business unit and geography. The key aspect now on the social governance side is really about interworkings with your employees, your communities, your suppliers, your customers, and overall human rights. The key is a lot more people want more visibility in your social governance model to make sure that you're doing things in an ethical way that makes the most sense in terms of how you're managing policies across geography as well as within your communities. The perception of how strong your organization is, how you handle your employees, your vendors, and customer relations. Challenge with corporate governance is really, I'm going to bucket into basically conflict of interest and business conduct rules. What we have seen over the last several months, I would even go the last 18 months, is more emphasis around conduct that aligns with the core values of an organization. And they're really looking at what you do, not just inside as well as outside the organization. So the old days, we're not as visible, but with social media and with cameras everywhere, it just means that you got more visibility into actions of people within an organization's operations and what they do outside that organization. Because as an employee, you have stringent contracts that you sign, and it's just becoming more prevalent now that how you conduct yourself inside and outside organization is becoming under more scrutiny. This just gives you a bit more details around how they're looking at corporate governance in terms of the ethics, because most organizations do annual or maybe quarterly reviews of business conduct to make sure everybody's in alignment with that. And it's just basically looking at encouraging people to have the right governance models for their financial statements, how they're working with people, just overall to make sure that they're being reviewed and that's reported up as part of the ESG process, as well as any other sort of reporting to other organizations, because there is a lot of ranking where organizations like to be the best employment area in terms of that. So there's a lot of bragging rights around that. So this all feeds into that. This just gives you a bit more insight around cybersecurity, around brand management, around how we attract the right employees, how we develop those employees as well. The board effectiveness, again, you set up metrics, you set up how you evaluate this. Could be employee lawsuits, it could be just overall employee surveys, both externally and internally, as part of how you position your comprehensive framework to address any issues, to make sure that you're always in evaluation of your employees, your vendors, and your customers, that you're achieving the desired results, which is a solid product line as well as a solid workplace of employment. Diversity, I won't spend a lot of time here, but what I'll highlight here is there's more and more emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations. Those policies are being revamped to make sure that we are addressing them accordingly, so it's a moving target. Let's talk about social governance. I would basically look at this in terms of how we handle and work with our vendors to make sure that they're adhering to employment standards. We also want to make sure that we're adhering to employment standards as well. I brought in activists and shareholders, and the reason why I want to do this quickly is just they're playing a bigger role. I'm seeing more and more organizations seeing activist shareholders buying into companies like Workday, Pepsi, and others to basically look at how they transform those organizations. Social media is getting a lot of focus, and we're seeing that over when events happen. Uh, like any sort of organization is putting social media posts on more scrutiny because that's an extension, and I've written blogs on this around brand management. And brand management has significant pressure on the organization because if customers have less trust or don't feel their confidence with that organization, they might be moving to other organizations to buy from. And that can have an impact on sales, margins, overall shareholders value. So the key thing is when you're looking at your social media that you define the strategy, you communicate it effectively, you do proper training on that, and you have the proper GRC or government risk compliance model to measure that to make sure that your brand is always protected, both from the company-wide brand as well as your employees as well. This is some of the things you can see around posts, and we're seeing a lot more about that. People need to put more thought what they post on social media in terms of the perceptions. It could be not necessarily directly, but it could be indirectly, or it could even be perceived of what that message is being said. This is another thing where we're starting to see now legal programs are coming in more and more evaluating these uh, behavior, and these behaviors are also tied to your contract, and they're also giving assessments in terms of around what you've done outline. But at the end of the day, it still comes back to this organization. You have an employee contract, you have a behavior that you need to do both inside and outside outside when your working time to ensure that you're meeting those standards. Freedom of expression, I won't get a lot into. It's something that will be challenged, but it's something that over time policies will get evaluated as possibly as court challenges come up. But at the end of the day, employers have the right to look at what's going on with their employers inside and out because you do sign contracts with those employees in terms of behavior, in terms of conduct. And this is really what this is about. You need, as I said, defined clear policy, and that's becoming more and more more prevalent now as we see things as we move forward in time. They're communicating it constantly. Organizations are doing it at least once a year, doing these social media training things. I anticipate that they'll become more quarterly. I've been actively involved on social media on LinkedIn reporting like fake job scammers, for example. And you're seeing more and more organizations that are putting a very stringent on what people do on social media. I make posts on social media, but I'm very professional how I do it because it's a reflection of who I am as a character as well as who I work for or who I represent, whether it's my clients or my employer. Social media will continue to be evolved, and we know that with what's happening with Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and all that. However, what's going to happen is more evolution around these policies in terms of what's going forward with them in terms of off duty and all that, and they'll constantly be challenged, but they'll also constantly be communicated more effectively around that behavior. I'm a believer in this, and I believe this wholeheartedly for my 35 plus year career, is you should be the same person you are within an organization, your working environment, that you're outside. You should conduct yourself in the same way. Cameras are everywhere, and we're seeing this with events that have happened at baseball games, concerts. We're seeing this happen with contracts when audit goes through and looks at the procurement process. That you can no longer hide from this stuff. You're constantly review. You need to be more cognizant of this. What I always say to people, you need to manage your name like a brand. And what you do as part of your professional and personal brand is critical. This just gets into establishing clear policies on social media. You are extension of that corporate brand. That's critical. I've, like I said earlier, encourage people to build their brands, and that's critical. Uh, and you also have to establish policies around whistleblowers so that you can report any sort of abuse without being penalized. And at the end of the day, you need to ensure that you have proper reporting you have proper training programs, and you have proper overall assessment of your policies, and it's a moving target that you should always constantly review. Here's some links to other links I do is, as I said, I'm all over this stuff. As a CPA, we live and breathe by business conduct rules and ethics. Most other professional associations do as well. And this is how you can get a hold of me. I offer more detailed presentations around this area and other areas. I have questionnaires on this. I'm more free to work with organizations, mostly small, mid-size, that are going through challenges around social and corporate governance. I can assist with that accordingly. Thank you.